This is John Doremus. Once again, I have the pleasure of introducing Mike Vance. Mike travels all over the world teaching the Vance creative thinking system to every type of business, organization, and group. He continues to plus his understanding of how to unlock ideas and manage by values. Displayed thinking, a system Mike has developed which is used by people in every type of business, institution, and home. The Vance organization has just completed this system installation and design work with S&A Restaurants, Avon Products, General Electric, Burger King, and others. Vance Design Incorporated completed General Electric's new Learning and Communication Center, and along with Buckminster Fuller, up until his recent death, had been involved in a major multiple building complex in Los Angeles. Also, Mike is currently working on the first university for senior citizens in the world. With all of this background, Mike envisions a new leadership model slowly beginning to emerge in the world. He calls it a new leadership paradigm. Already, his statement about this new leadership, which is on the back of this album, is found in the offices of executives and leaders around the world. So come up to date now and explore some new avenues with Mike Vance.
The central idea or the central treatise of this series is that our world has changed very little. I know everybody keeps talking about how much the world has changed and how we have to worry about future shock and so forth. And I think there's no question about that there have been many scientific and great technological advancements, but what I would really call big changes, the kind of changes in areas that really matter to man by enhancing both our happiness, by enhancing our fulfillment. These kind of great big changes have been very few. We're still doing things like we did it 100 years ago. We're not too much further in many of them than we were at the turn of the century. We still have really excessive world hunger. We still have a plethora of people that don't know what it is that's going on. We still have a lot of crime. We still are threatened by global wars. And we still have those that want but can't have. And yet, with all of these things, we still have basically a storage culture. We store our senior citizens in places outside of society's mainstream, so that we have one of the greatest databases in the world, the minds of people that have finally come, many of them, to great wisdom. And what do we do with them? We store them. We put them in permanent holding patterns over John F. Kennedy. And when you're in one of those places, the only way out is crash. We've become a storage culture, and we store furniture. We store many unsold cars. We store products that nobody wants. We store inventories of unused office buildings and abandoned manufacturing facilities. But I think the most serious thing is that we store an awful lot of knowledge. We store it instead of use it, because we've really known how to solve the great world problems. We've really had an understanding of it since the turn of the century, how we could have more fulfillment, more happiness, and how we could bring about greater peace within the world. And yet we've yet to act on the knowledge that we have. However, there's good news. And the good news is this. Many of you that have heard and worked with me, I travel all over the world, and I'm working with every size company, big and little, and in all kinds of situations. One of the things that we see that's going on worldwide, and it's not just something that is localized, but a worldwide move that is, I think, one of the most significant of all trends that we've had in a long time, is that I believe that storage is going to end. I think we're going to start taking things out of storage. That means that real change is going to take place. And everywhere I go, this true change is in the air. I think that we're on the eve of what I call one of the three great Lutions. If you think of all the different Lutions we've had, meaning Lutions, if you think of all the Lutions that we've had, there have first been two basic Lutions. The first Lution, of course, is evolution. Evolution is where God or nature, whatever your theological position, whether you're mechanistic or teleological, the first is evolution, where God and man and nature, where they create and evolve the new, change the coastlines, and where we still even discover new solar systems, so we know that evolution is still going on out there, like the one that was recently discovered out near Vega. That's the first thing, is evolution. The second major Lution is, of course, revolution. Revolution is where man joins up with God or man joins up with nature and sort of assist in the changing of boundaries of coastlines and the boundaries of countries and the redistribution of resources and sending up telling stars into the sky. Now we are into the greatest, probably since recorded history, the greatest lution of all. And it's a lution, I coined a term to express it, and it's called rovolution. R-O-B-O-L-U-T-I-O-N. Rovolution is where man and God and nature or whatever now have a third partner in this. We've created the helper, the robot. And with revolution is going to come some of the most extraordinary things in the world. There's no question about the fact that Abraham Lincoln freed one set of slaves. And now what's going to happen is we're in revolution, the robot has the opportunity to really free another group of slaves. And that is people that have been slaves to dangerous work, people that have been slaves to monotonous tasks. And we have an opportunity to make a major breakthrough and issue in a renaissance of mankind if we begin to see what revolution really means, rather than having revolution be fearful, be frightened of it. Most people, if they could see down the road, way down the road, what it's going to do to culture, most people would not reject it. The first really robot that people loved, most of you remember, was in The Wizard of Oz. The first robot, of course, was the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. But of course, the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz had one thing that he wanted, and all of you know, which was he wanted a heart. And as we now enter mankind's third greatest lution, the one major thing that we have to have in leadership, and probably the most crucial thing that we have to have in all the leadership situations we're in, is that we have to add heart to it. There's no question that the world awaits a new leadership. Our problems are too complex, too awesome for them to be handled in old ways. So there is a new leadership model that is required if we're going to solve world-round, world-encompassing problems before we're vaporized. I think that previous leadership styles haven't really worked well enough in the long run because the world keeps getting deeper and deeper into confusion and doubt and non-action alongside of great technological miracles. So you see, one is the antithesis of the other. So now the time has come. It's really the dawning of a new age. Bucky Fuller said it. The world's term papers do. You know, God said, I want to know how you're going to do, world. He said that the world's term paper is called integrity, brought about by the threat of a nuclear war. But think about it. When do most of us write our term papers? When we go to school. We write them the night before. That's right. And that's where the world is right now. It's the night before, term papers due, all the cards are in, no more footnotes, no more books to read. We have enough information. So now we have no options either. We have to solve the world's problem. We must do one of two things. And it sounds like a panacea. It sounds like idealism. It sounds to some even unrealistic. Those who really know, those who really understand the great balances of power going on all over the world know that we either are going to use the magnificent resources that are available in the integrity universe to make the earth a garden finally and to turn the deserts into flowering places, or we're going to have the opposite of it. Instead of the blooming flower and a new lease of life world over, we'll see a flash. It is in this, I think, climate that we have great need. And this great need is producing a new leadership paradigm or a new leadership model. Paradigm, as you know, is spelled P-A-R-A-D-I-G-M. And it is the model that is slowly beginning to now emerge. We talked about this new leadership in the 60s. We studied it in the 70s. Now we got to try it and do it in the 80s. I think we have the know-how. We know we have the resources, and we sure have the technology. And the question really is when. When are we going to do it? And of course, the answer is that now is the time. So I believe that this changing leadership paradigm started becoming partially clear to me when I was working at Walt Disney Studio. Because I remember early one morning, it was about 1965, I was walking from the studio's entrance gate with Walt Disney. It was a beautiful morning, and we were walking over to the animation building where our planning centers and offices were located. And it was a sort of a misty Southern California rain was falling as Walt philosophized with me about helping people to grow by keeping them involved with the practical rather than getting too theoretical. Walt was that kind of a guy. And I don't think I'll ever forget the concern that he had. It was a really sincere concern that he expressed walking along about his people, about his company, and about a new project that he had on his mind. It's called Walt Disney World. Yeah, such intimate encounters as this one I'm describing to you with Walt were rare for me, but it was one of the most indelible ones that I had with him. I'll never forget, he said, you know, you've got to let people participate. Everybody wants to get in the act. He said, let them. They have to feel part of this thing. It's the only way you can build an organization. He said, you know, everyone wants to get in the act, so I think you ought to let them. And that kept going through my mind, what Walt Disney said. His words were really in quite a sharp contrast to a lot of my previous background in leadership training, probably a lot of yours too. Because my experiences in business and as an infantry officer in Korea were unlike what Walt Disney was talking about. The leadership models that influenced my basic thinking usually told people what to do and rarely consulted with anybody. Learning from Walt this concept made me stop to really start examining what was going on worldwide. Well, I left Walt standing at his door, and my next appointment that morning was a visit with his brother, Roy Disney, who was Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of the Board, a magnificent man. And Roy was in the Board of Directors room, which was right on the floor below. And he was seated all alone at the head of a long conference table, surrounded by magnificent drawings and detailed sketches and charts and plans for what would become Walt Disney World. These concepts were pinned up all over the walls, about 4 feet by 8 foot boards that they called storyboards at Disney Studio, making it physically possible for people to see what was going on, and I guess, as Walt said, to get in the act if they wanted to. I was in the act right away, and Roy and I talked for a long time, probably 2 hours, I guess. And we were talking about what he was going to say the following day to a group of men in a management development program. Roy was sort of thinking out loud, reviewing his thoughts, and mentally, I think, thinking about what their impact would be, because he considered the meeting important, because the participants would be among the first management personnel at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida. So this talk was one of many such philosophical discussions that we had together, but it was one of the most significant because of what he said. He said, what makes us successful in the past at Disney is we've made good decisions. We've made some bad ones, but not too many. And I think our best decisions come when we stick to our values. He said, we must never compromise our values for a quick buck. He said, that's not our style. We have to keep our promises and make a contribution. And he said, also, face facts when they hit you in the face. Don't run away from the truth. I'll never forget what he said. He said, you know, if you can't pay your banker, level with him, and he'll usually work with you. He continued, and he said, you know, when you know what your values are, decision-making is easy. Destructive values usually cause bad decisions, and constructive values usually cause good decisions. And it was there, when I heard what Roy Disney had said, that I first began to think about the idea or the concept of management by values. So management by values, in my mind, then became a part of this new leadership paradigm following the talk with Roy Disney. He said it, I think he saw it, and I think in my experiences with Roy Disney, he really was a man that practiced management by values. As a matter of fact, as I look back, values were continuously emphasized by nearly everyone during the years I worked at Disney. In fact, on the same day Walt and Roy made the statements I talked to you about, another incident occurred which underscored the focus on values at the studio. That evening, a management development group was having dinner at the Smokehouse restaurant in Burbank, California, with a man named E. Carden Walker, who was then a vice president and later became Disney's CEO and probably the major driving force behind Disney. Card, as Walker was called by nearly everyone, invested, just countless hours in having evening dinners and discussions on values and philosophy with the men and the women of his company. I think he went farther than any executive I've known to uphold and articulate what he considered to be worthwhile and important concept. He, to me at the time, epitomized in every way a man of values. At this dinner, he was discussing with the group the criteria to use when evaluating a management action to be taken when carrying out their jobs in some part of Disney. He said, quote, "You have to ask yourself the question, is it right for us? Does it fit in with the way we do things? And if something doesn't feel right to you, bounce the idea off some more people in the company. Remember what our creed is. We look to the name Walt Disney for the finest in family entertainment. That's what we're about. That's what our thing is." Well, I think this creed, look to the name Walt Disney for the finest in family entertainment, really is a very succinct statement of values. Millions of people all over the world have grown to admire Disney for their devotion to maintaining the highest standards while executing a lot of complex projects that no one else would even try. Yeah, you just know they wouldn't even try. They couldn't get anybody to give them the money. One of the things that has made them so outstanding, if something isn't exactly right the first time, well, what their practice has been, they keep working at it, fooling with it, keep plussing it until they get it right. But you know, so much has happened in the United States between, well, say the 60s and the 70s. I'm afraid a lot of these changes might sadden Walt and Roy because they knew you had to let people get in the act. They understood that people had to participate at every level in any organization. They knew you had to focus on values and not sell out. If you wanted a real good, constant, long-term bottom line, the bottom line came from having a good philosophy, which is top-line thinking. Well, you know, time passes quickly. And hopefully we grow a little more capable as the time passes. Personally, you know, as I examine my own life, and I'm sure you will find the same thing true, and as I hear other friends of mine analyzing their life, and leaders and chief executives, it's clear that when we sacrifice constructive values for some short-term, some quick gain, that's when trouble starts. I can trace almost every personal failure that I've ever had to compromise on that part. It's when I compromised a value that I really knew was important. And you'll probably discover the exact same thing if you examine your successes and your failures. Starting, I think, with the Disney experience and continuing through consulting work with a lot of businesses and companies, I think, and my exposure also in lecturing to people all over the world, I think I've lectured every kind of audience there is. Nuns, prison wardens, casino dealers. I even talk to ET occasionally. I think that the idea of management by values continued to grow. But one truth, you know, continued to appear consistently among all the experiences I had with all these different companies, that the successful company in the long run focused on values. And I kept seeing that the failing companies and the failing people were focusing on the fast thing, or as Roy Disney said, the quick buck, and had an obsession with the bottom line. So what we've had and what we continue to have, I think in our country, we got too many lawyers. See, lawyers and accountants have been making an altar almost out of the net. See, and what happened? As the fact that all these lawyers did that, because, well, what happened is the Japanese got us. And probably we deserved to be gotten. Nobody could figure this out for a long time. How did they accomplish a task of nearly wiping out one of the major powers of the earth, this little country and these people? How could they? Because they're really short, too. And, you know, that doesn't make any sense, because Americans can't understand. Somebody's tall, you're automatically president or chairman of the board, and if you got a big Rolex and wingtips, and you're in. 6 lawyers around you, you're in. Now, all of a sudden, the short people came along. Well, what we didn't understand was that their brains, it's true, were no larger than ours, and they were in shorter bodies. But there was a big difference. They were using their brains. We were busy playing racquetball, waiting for business to get better. What we became was a nature of ball bouncers, hitting anything and everything that moved whenever it moved. So tall people, they couldn't figure this thing out, how these short people did it, because it had always just been taken for granted. But the charade was over when productivity and creativity and bottom lines and all the GNPs and the balance of trade and nearly everything went to the dogs. Then, can't you almost envision this? Some genius said, I wonder how the Japanese do this. Maybe we can learn something from the Japanese. And so we began the Japanizing of America by the same people, many of them, who helped Americanize Japan. Short was in, figuratively speaking, and American business was off on a new toot called the Quality Circle. And the Quality Circle proliferated faster than lawyers and rabbits and New Mexican restaurants. Isn't it funny? But Walt Disney practiced the essence of the concept in the 1930s. But you see, he saw participation involvement as a way of life. It wasn't some program he had at 3 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to improve productivity. He said once, quote, nobody has a corner on brains. Good ideas can come from anywhere and usually do, unquote. Well, I think experience is teaching us rapidly that the quality circle can be good or bad for an organization. The basic concept has got to be expanded out to include entire new ways of work, new ways to think, new ways to grow, new ways to design environments. And they often fail because they're viewed as a technique to get more out of workers. We've heard this comment, I've heard it many times in companies that I've worked with, where they're running hundreds of quality circles. These are quotes. It's a gimmick. Nothing has really changed around here. We still have, and I have to say what's said, the same old son of bitches that are trying to act nice, but they're still the same ones. And I think I heard this comment, somebody was commenting about their new corporate headquarters, which is supposed to be the end-all corporate headquarters in creative environments. And this person said, well, the place looks good outside, even though the people all over town don't like it because it looks weird. The halls are pretty. The new lobby looks like a cross between a Hyatt and a jungle. But for us, she meant the workers, nothing's changed. We still have fluorescent lights. We still have cold tile floors. We still have dropped acoustical ceilings. We got a lot of sunlight and no place to put anything. Well, these statements reveal an awful lot. What do they reveal? They reveal no change. No new leadership paradigm. Management attempted to copy a technique, and they failed at philosophy. Nevertheless, there are some examples where great success has been achieved, where we've had an alliance between technique and constructive values, which is the issue of philosophy. Take Apple Computer. Apple Computer's management invited me to work with them, well, on many occasions. We spent, during the early years of the company and later, we spent hours talking together, day and night, really, about many of the concepts that I'd learned when working at Disney and at other companies, which we then developed into really a whole concept of creative thinking that I've developed with a lot of my clients. One of the things that we found at Apple Computer right away became apparent. They were very different. And what the difference from other companies that we've worked with was absolutely clear. They picked up on the concepts of doing good creative thinking and having good participation concepts immediately. They just started doing it. What they focused on was the question of values and philosophy. In fact, you know, Apple held a major convention where I happened to speak in Hawaii, and it was called, if you can believe it, Apple Values. Frankly, my early exposure to Apple management reminded me a lot of the Disney organization in the early years. It was a lot like the Disney organization in the early years. Half the people wore beards and sandals, and the other half wore three-piece suits and looked like John Malloy. Conflict. Those two groups don't like each other. And they fought, and they argued, and they struggled, and they faced failure, but they allowed each other to be different. The key vice president of Apple that I like very much, his name is John Couch, once said to me about Apple, he said, there's a brotherhood here. We go at it, and I'll attest to that, they do. But there's a lot of mutual respect here, unquote. Mike Markkula, one of the founders of Apple and its past president and one of its real steadying forces, Mike said to me one day, I'll never forget it, sitting, we were talking about everything. He said, you know, it's all values. Without good values, there's nothing. Thinking about our values is the most important thing that we can do. Now think about what that man just said. Here is one of the top rising young companies. You know, everybody thinks they're going to get them, but maybe somebody get them, but look what they've done. The point is, look what they've done. And here is a top executive, this magnificent young company, and one of its founders making a statement, the most important thing that we can talk about is our values. You can see there's something new that is beginning to happen. It's true that the world has long awaited this new leadership that would bring us hope instead of despair, that would free us rather than enslave us, that would unlock human potential instead of curtailing it. And I think that you're going to find that such a new thing is emerging worldwide, and its emphasis is on values and on participation. And I think we're just in the beginning. And I know there'll be a lot of cultivation, but there are signs everywhere that something truly fundamental is happening. It's exciting. It's challenging. It's a beautiful time. In fact, it may be one of the most significant times, the beginning of the revolution in American management history. Tabula rasa, a clean sheet, a new beginning, a fresh tablet is what it's all about. We're getting ready to write on it. And we're going to write entire new acts of leadership and attitudes. Behavioral theory is giving way to behavioral reality. And the behavioral reality is that people count, not some people, but all people count. We only got 3 billion people in the world. We've got a shortage. We just got a new solar system we discovered. And like the Tin Men need, we know what we need. We've got to get heart into it. And that is the beginning of one of the most extraordinary new moments in history. As you start to think about it, as you begin to look at this new leadership paradigm, what I would like to do is to show you some of the various parts of it and how some of those various parts fit together. If you'll look on the back of your album, on there is the definition of what I believe to be the new leadership paradigm. Let's take a look at it. Leadership is the ability to establish standards and manage a creative climate where people are self-motivated toward the mastery of long-term constructive goals in a participatory environment of mutual respect compatible with personal values. Now, each of those words there are the various parts and I think elements of this emerging leadership style. These were not made up. They are ones that we've just observed, and as we've observed them, they've gradually come together. So first what we'd like to do is do in the 1/3, 2/3 concept of presenting things. In the 1/3, we go through and explain the essence of what it is that the leadership definition is about, and then the next 2/3 of the time we'll spend in filling in all the details. Please understand that I don't believe that there is anybody yet that fills that definition. I know many companies that are trying. I know many companies that do many pieces of it. I think it's an ideal towards which we're working. I think it is a goal out there towards which we're making a journey. Many of you know I have spent a lot of time working with the late Buckminster Fuller, the inventor of the Dymaxion map and the geodesic dome. We were with Dr. Fuller just prior to when he graduated from the physical dimension to the next dimension. I imagine, I've been in fact thinking about that new solar system, and I keep looking up in the sky and thinking maybe it'll be Dymaxion in shape. Bucky was such an extraordinary man, left the world such a rich place. One of the things he said, we talked about the new leadership paradigm, and one of the things that Bucky said, he said, you know, Mike, the Red Sea is still open, and mankind needs to fill it with integrity and good information.